Immigration vetting in the U.S. is now a whole lot more than just paperwork, or even more than interviews. And vetting doesn't involve just immigrants. It involves anyone who is connected to an immigration process. Petitioners, sponsors, maybe even family members, spouses. So this is becoming a big deal that I'm sure some of you have heard about. You might not know this, but ICE does not have to wear body cameras. So the vast majority of them don't. However, they are using their own personal phones with their favorite new app to take pictures of people's faces. Because we're going to talk about this app a little bit later. It does facial recognition. An ICE agent comes up to you and says, where's your identification? I don't have any identification. Well, what's your name? I don't answer questions. Boom, stand there. We're going to take your picture. And guess what? You're not allowed to opt out of it. And that means the immigrants can't opt out of it. The U.S. citizens can't opt out of it. Nobody can opt out of it. You have to let them take your photograph. Ironically, the citizens that are having the biggest problem with this is rich. The citizens having the biggest problem with this are the indigenous ones, the Indians, the Native Americans, because they have a lot of facial features that look maybe Latino in some way, right? Because a lot of Mexicans, a lot of Guatemalans, Hondurans, Peruvians, there's a lot of folks that are actually of Indian background. So the indigenous people, the Native Americans, are having problems because this AI program that they're using is showing up that, oh, this person looks just like that person. I don't know if you guys watch John Bryan. He's an attorney out of West Virginia, and he's known as the civil rights attorney. And he's done multiple videos, not about immigrants, but about U.S. citizens who have gotten caught up with this AI facial recognition stuff. There was a woman, a grandmother, that got picked up someplace and supposedly taken back to, I think it was North Dakota, and she'd never even been in North Dakota, but there was a warrant for her arrest, and AI said that this was the person. There was just a guy, I watched this a couple of times recently. There was a guy in Reno, and he'd gone into a casino to relax, to play some games. And the casino's AI app identified him as somebody who had already been trespassed from the casino. I don't remember what that guy's name was, but the guy who had been trespassed was known as M.E. M.E. So they detain him and they say, you've been trespassed from here. He says, I've never been trespassed from here. They call the Reno police. They show the Reno police the facial recognition thing. Oh, wow, that's really weird. Yeah, this is definitely him. Meanwhile, this poor guy has shown both the Reno police and the casino that he's got his driver's license from Nevada. This is with his correct name, and this is not me. Well, they already had a copy of M.E.'s driver's license. Well, now the genius at the Reno police say, oh, now you're in big trouble because now you have produced 2 documents from the DMV. He must have a friend or somebody in the DMV who's making a false ID for him. Oh my God, what a nightmare. You should watch it. The civil rights lawyer. But so this doesn't impact just immigrants. This impacts all of us. But it's particularly concerning for U.S. citizens and the sponsors, because sponsors aren't used to having a problem, unless they fall under the Adam Walsh Act, which I'll talk about that in a different video. I'm not going to do that. That's somebody who's already had some serious problems and they can't, never mind. I'm not going to get into it, but sponsors are the U.S. citizens. So why are they being put through all this baloney? Well, we're going to talk about it. I'm sorry, I interrupted myself. I do this a lot. Let's go back to the Native Americans that are having problems. I heard about this last winter. I think it was reported in November of 25. Do you guys know who Elaine Miles is? She's an Indian actress who is best known for Northern Exposure and Smoke Signals. There were a couple of other shows, but I recognized her immediately because she was, I don't know if you know the story of Northern Exposure, where this New York City doctor has to go to Alaska to help pay off his medical school loans. He's stuck in this little rinky-dink town, and his secretary is this Indian who's very deadpan, and she doesn't smile much. And well, that's Elaine Miles, right? Well, she got picked up. She's in Redmond, Washington, which is about 15 miles from Seattle, Washington. She's in Redmond, she's walking towards a bus stop, and these two black SUVs come up and stop. And they don't have any front plates, and it's required in Washington State. I lived there for a year. It's required in Washington State that you have both front and back license plates, right? They have no front license plates. So 4 ICE agents jump out. Their faces are covered, although they do have ICE labels on them, but their faces are covered. And they want her ID, right? They're pressing her for her ID, right? So she's got it. She hands them over her tribal ID. Let me double check what it's called here. She handed them her tribal ID from Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation in Oregon. Now, she has used this ID for years, traveling back and forth between the United States and Canada, United States and Mexico. She's never had a problem. The feds always recognize this as a valid form of ID. Well, not this time. These ICE agents, one of them says, that's a fake. And another one says, well, anybody can make them. And they detain her. Is that rich? She's a freaking Native American. And you're trying to deport her? To where? To where are you supposed to deport her? Anyway, okay. All right, let's focus here, Bev. Let's focus. The vetting is off the hook. That's my point. The vetting is off the hook, right? When they're trying to deport Native Americans, we have a problem. So what is the vetting? They're trying to have more and more vetting, right, to try and protect people. They've also put a pause on a lot of cases because of they have to redo vetting. They want to redo fingerprints, blah, blah, blah. So the vetting is now facial recognition based on this, app we're going to talk about. And you can also get fingerprints off of a phone. I know they can do that. They also connect, they put this facial recognition in, and then they can connect to all these different government databases. And to be honest with you, I did immigration law for 40 years, and it always surprised me that, they would check your fingerprints against the FBI, right? I'm talking about the immigrant. They would check the immigrant's fingerprints to see if they had any kind of a record. But they really didn't cross-reference stuff. I never understood that. They didn't cross-reference Social Security records. Well, they're doing it now. And they're trying to cross-reference as many databases as possible, which I can't really fault them for that. The facial recognition stuff, though, because it's so notorious at this point, and it's early days, but it's infamous for being wrong. It could be wrong as much as it is right. Well, probably not, but it could be wrong a lot. So today we're going to break down Mobile Fortify, which is the app, a new biometric entry and exit system that they're using, why secondary inspection is expanding, and what secondary inspection is. I think most people know, but I'll explain that if you don't. And what this means, not just for the immigrants, but for visitors and for U.S. citizens. I guess you heard that they're expecting to have millions and millions of people here for the FIFA Cup, but not as many people are coming. They're going to Canada and they're going to Mexico, but they don't want to come here because they don't want to have problems. They don't know they don't know what's going on with this president. They don't know if the rules for today, if they're going to be the rules next month. So, something that was supposed to be a big success for us now is not so much. Anyway, let's get into it. As I said, vetting is now at all stages possible. Before the immigrant enters the United States, at the airport or the port of entry, and while they're inside the United States, and especially during enforcement actions, right? So everything is connected. In late 2025, DHS finalized a rule that expanded the biometric collection for all non-citizens, okay? Anybody who's entering and leaving the U.S. In fact, I just heard this attorney, Brad, who's out of New York. Somebody had asked him a question about, am I going to have a problem? I just want to go home. I'm tired of all this. I want to go home. He says, oh, sure, you can go home. They won't give you a problem if you go home. Which, that's the advice I had given clients for decades. But, every once in a while I had somebody that just said, I don't want to be here anymore. And am I going to have a problem? And the answer was always, nope, you're going to have no problem. You just go. No big deal. Well, guess what? Now it's a little bit of a deal because they're going to take your photograph. They're going to look at your face. They're going to, if they can, take your fingerprints. They're trying to keep track of everybody. This is more than just protecting the border, okay? This is getting into 1984-ish stuff. But okay. So, like I said, it's everywhere. It's at the seaports. It's at the airports. It's at the border crossings. It's everywhere, and it's all connected, right? So, in late 2025, DHS finalized a rule. Now, listen, DHS, they're in charge of immigration, so they're allowed to make their rules. It comes under the Code of Federal Regulations. They can make their rules and change things as they feel it's important to do. So they made this change for all non-citizens. All this biometric stuff is changed for all non-citizens. That was late last year. And DHS says this helps. My kitty cat. DHS says this helps because it detects visa overstays. That's another thing. If they came in as a student or they came in on a B2 or something and they overstayed their visa, well, now they've got proof. When you leave the country, they're snapping pictures and they've got proof that you overstayed, and that's going to be a big problem, 2, 3, 4 years later when you want to come back. You want to get a new visa because now you're older, more mature, and you're going to take better advantage of the situation that you had here. Good luck. They already know that you overstayed. DHS says, number one, it detects visa overstays. Number two, it prevents fraud, and it identifies security risks. Okay, let's talk about this Mobile Fortify app. So this is how it works. An ICE agent points a government-issued smartphone at you and snaps a photo. It can get your face, and it can get your fingerprints, and within seconds he's going to know if you had a deportation order, or let me rephrase, if AI thinks you have a deportation order. This Mobile Fortify, it went live I think in June of 2025, and it searches more than 200 million photographs. I'm getting this from an article that was written a few months ago. So, this 200 million photographs is more today. Because every day they're putting more and more information in. It searches 200 million photographs that are stored in all these different federal databases. There's no warrant required. There's no reasonable suspicion required. Just point and scan, right? CBPs, that's the Border Patrol people, right? CBP's systems operate at fixed checkpoints, right? Airports, seaports, land borders, where people present themselves for inspection. It's got controlled lighting. It's got, normally they give advance notice. They tell you we're going to take your body measurements. And that's fine, okay? That's fine. Mobile Fortify doesn't work like that. That works anywhere. Street corners, during traffic stops, during protests, outside apartment buildings. The lighting can be, I'm just going to say crappy. Am I allowed to say that? Yeah. The lighting is crappy, and so it's much more likely that you're going to have problems with photographs taken by this particular app. And according to leaked secret documents, I don't know, they didn't, in this article that I'm quoting this from, they didn't say what the documents were, so I don't know. But according to this article, there were leaks that said that the app's super query means question, by the way, super query feature pulls up associated vehicles, addresses, phone numbers, and firearms ownership information by connecting the FBI databases and state and motor vehicle records. I'm going to talk about that in a second too, about how many states have decided that, sure, we're going to let ICE have all our documentation regarding everybody who has a driver's license in this state. Great. See, it's getting more and more like 1984, right? Back to the future, just saying. In addition, the app stores every scan, saves it for 15 years. You know, I don't know how police ever solved problems back in the 1940s and 50s. Well, I don't know when fingerprints became a thing. But, you know, before they had all these cameras on every street and every doorbell has a camera and all these people have cameras, and, you know, before all this AI and the DNA stuff, how did the police ever manage to solve a case? I don't know. Because right now it seems like all they have to do is push a couple of buttons and boom, here's the guy that we think did it, whatever it is. So, as I said, it stores every scan for 15 years, and that includes scans of U.S. citizens. Okay, this is not just immigrants, this is U.S. citizens too. So if 15 years down the road you have a problem because you know, your wife broke up with you and you went off on a bender and, you know, got into a bar fight, police are going to come in, click, click, oh, we know who you are, we know who you are, you know, we know where you live, we know this, that, da, 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 da. Oh my goodness, I'm telling you, it's scary. When the app returns a match, officers can see the person's name. Now, this is important because a lot of times, you know, if an ICE officer stops somebody, right? I've seen this on YouTube with many. I watch a lot of this stuff, as you can imagine, but I've seen it on YouTube where, you know, the ICE officers come up to this group of guys and they zero in on this one particular person and they say, you know, what's your, you know, give us your ID. And he's like, oh, I don't have any ID. Well, what's your name? I don't answer questions. Well, guess what? Click, click. If you've had any kind of contact, if you came in on a visa, for instance, they know who you are. If you've had an interview because you're a permanent resident, they know who you are. If you've applied for asylum and you went to an asylum interview, boom. Or you've had your biometrics taken because of your asylum application, they know who you are. So when the app returns a match, I just said that, right? When an app returns a match, officers see the person's name, date of birth, nationality. They give it an A number, even if they didn't have an A number. An A number it's called an alien number. It's an A number. It's actually the number on your physical file. Anytime somebody applies for something and a file gets opened up in USCIS, boom, it's a brown file and it's got a number that starts up it has on the little tab, it's got A, da 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 da, right? Oh my God, I think, well, it was 9 numbers. It might be 10 by now. Wouldn't surprise me if it's 10 at this point because there's just so many people. But anyway, that's called an A number. It's actually your alien file. So guess what? They open up an A file on you if if they scan you, they open up an A file on you. They have an A number for you, which means they have an alien file for you. They're also going to know whether or not a judge ever ordered a deportation order. So it's going to make their job a whole lot easier because this whole process takes seconds. It's one of those bing, and all of a sudden they have all your information available to them. Here's the other thing. This bugs me. The app can also search driver's licenses from, the license photos that you get, those lovely photos of you for your driver's license. They can search state databases from 41 states. That means that ICE officers can potentially identify nearly everybody, almost everybody that's got a driver's license in this country. They can access your information just by clicking your photograph. That's all they have to do. Standing on a street corner. Lovely. And here's what most people don't understand this. You can't opt out. Not only do they not need a warrant, you can't say no. I don't want you to take my photograph. Not an option. You have to submit to it. My daughter says to me, is that even legal? Is that legal? Well, apparently, yes, it is. Until a court says it's not, yes, it is. And we're going to talk about that a little bit because there is some legislation pending, but too little, too late. So Mobile Fortify is engineered to generate new records for people that ICE officers encounter that they don't even have reasonable suspicion of. They don't even need reasonable suspicion. They just take a photograph just for the heck of it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about secondary inspection and what's been changing. DHS is increasingly scrutinizing frequent travelers, supposedly, I guess, trying to check out fraud issues. They're even looking at U.S. citizens who are tied somehow to an immigration case. They're the sponsor or the petitioner. Now, almost all petitioners are sponsors, but not all sponsors are petitioners. And by sponsors, I mean folks who have agreed to do an affidavit of support for somebody as a joint sponsor. So they're checking out everybody. Well, why is that? Part of the reason is because they can. It's that simple. They can. And they can check out, a U.S. citizen who comes in with his wife, and they can check him out. They check out his biometrics, his photos. It links to all of these databases. They know if he hasn't paid his child support. They know if there's a warrant out for his arrest someplace. So they're trying to catch as many people as they can, both immigrants and non-immigrants. So what happens? When you land, you have to go present your passport, right? And they ask you a bunch of questions. And then they're going to scan your biometrics. They're going to check your travel history. They're going to see if anything shows up from, the databases that they can get into. And if there are some kind of immigration petitions that you filed, any of those things can be flagged and they can put you in secondary inspection. What that means is that they take you aside to a different room, and that's where they're going to question you extensively when they have the time to do it. It's very hard to do that when a plane lands and there's hundreds of people getting off. They wait until they have some men, or some, I shouldn't say men, they wait until they have some officers available to handle all these different people. So guess what? You're missing your connecting flight for sure. If you're put into secondary inspection, they're going to miss your flight. Well, what can they do to you there? Well, one of the things they can do, they can check your phone, they can check your laptop, they can check your what was the other thing? Oh, your tablets, right? They can look at all your devices basically, right? So just to be clear, CBP does have the authority to search your electronic devices at ports of entry. They can do that. That's perfectly legal. And those kind of searches can be done randomly, or if they have some kind of reasonable suspicion. You might be asked to unlock your device, and if you refuse to do that, you can, number one, get denied entry into the country. I don't think that's true for U.S. citizens, but it's certainly true to someone who's not a U.S. citizen. They can just say, we're not letting you in, or they can seize your device, and they'll figure out a way to get into it. Trust me. They will. There are some legal challenges out there, but the current policy right now is that those searches are completely acceptable. You don't need a search warrant. You don't even need reasonable suspicion. It can just be done on a random basis. And if they don't have reasonable suspicion, they're going to say it's being done on a random basis, which it may or may not be. The government, the law enforcement is allowed to lie to you. That was also a Supreme Court decision many years ago. You can't lie to them. If you lie to them, that's a willful misrepresentation of a material fact. But they can lie to you all they want. Great. So anyway, they're going to look at all your devices. They're going to check all the databases that they can possibly check. They're going to verify relationships that are in petitions. Imagine that you have filed for your spouse, right? But you and your spouse are on a break because things are just too hot, and not hot in a good way. Things are not good, and you're on a break, and you've taken your girlfriend down to Bermuda or something, and you come back through the airport. They're going to ask, well, who are you traveling with? Oh, Mary Sue over here. She's my secretary. So guess what? That's all going into the database. If you have filed a petition for your spouse, who you love and you have a child with, but sometimes she's such a biatch, and you just have to go off and be with your secretary who's like so nice. Guess what? That's going into the record, and when the time comes for Mary Sue is the girlfriend. When it comes time for Wifey Poo to have her interview at immigration, it's going to show up that in June of 2026, Mr. Husband over here was traveling back from Bermuda, or did I say Barbados or Bermuda? Coming back from the islands with somebody else. So of course that's going to raise a bunch of red flags. This is going to do nothing but throw wrenches into all the visa petitions that are out there. Just saying. So why are petitioners being flagged for this? Here's the top reasons. One, fraud detection. That's what they say. They're trying to find fake relationships. They're trying to find patterns of multiple filings, which by that I mean you were married before and you petitioned for your other spouse, your first spouse. And now 5 years later, you're petitioning for another spouse. There really technically should not be anything wrong with that. But it raises red flags, raises eyebrows. It's going to cause a problem down the pike. And up until now, they wouldn't necessarily have known too much about that. Another reason, inconsistencies. They're looking at your travel history. Let's say you have a spouse who's in Germany, and you've only gone to Germany once in the last 3 years to see her. And they can see from your record that, wait a minute, you flew in from Paris a year and a half ago, but you didn't go stop over in Munich to visit your wife. You flew in from Poland you know, 6 months ago, but you didn't make a stop in Munich to see your wife, there's going to be issues like that. It's just, it all works towards whether or not this relationship is real. And they can check all that stuff. So, just so that you realize that DHS is not just screening applicants and immigrants, they're also screening the petitioners. So, lastly, let's be real, okay? This system raises some serious concerns. Like I said, it's very much out of 1984. Facial recognition can be so inaccurate, and bias can affect outcomes. I mean, why do you think that they stopped Elaine Miles? Why do you think they took a photograph of her? Well, I'll give you a hint. She's not a blonde and she doesn't have blue eyes. Bias can cause a lot of problems down the road. This is, you know, and oh, by the way, the AI stuff, I guess you probably already know this, but AI is highly inaccurate, generally speaking, but it's especially inaccurate for people of color and for women. So you can imagine how women of color are having a tough time with this. I don't know why women have more of a problem, but apparently they do. There's more inconsistencies and more inaccuracies for women or for people of color, just so that you're aware of that. Lawmakers have already proposed laws that would restrict tools like Mobile Fortify due to, you know, all the civil liberties problems. But as of right now, it's a go. So one of the most important things you have to assume, just assume that your data is being cross-checked. It's just like when you're out there and you're thinking about committing a crime, assume that somebody is filming you, right? So everything that you say, everything that's in your social media, I mean, years ago, I'm going to end with this one little story and then I'll shut up. Years ago, I had this woman who was married, and this was when everybody was still on Facebook, and I went up and I checked out her Facebook page, and under marital status, or status, it said status, she had, it's complicated. So I said to her before she left my office the first time, get into Facebook and change that. If you're married, you're married. It's not complicated. You're married. I bring her and her husband back in right before the interview, and I had made a note in the file, double check this check. I went back up on Facebook, it's still complicated. And I told her, you have got to change that, because if you think they're not checking your social media, they are. Same thing here. Be consistent with all your filings. Assume that everything is being checked and double checked. And if you have any possible issues and you might get put into secondary inspection, make sure that you have a long period of time between this flight and your connecting flight. Because if it's only an hour, you're gonna miss it. And on that happy note, I'll leave you alone, and I'll see you in the next video. Hit subscribe if you like this stuff. Talk to you later.